All right, so we're going to be talking about reality assumptions for chapter 3. We will also be talking about deductive reasoning syllogisms, and we will get to that in a little bit. But first, let's get into reality assumptions. Now, in chapter 2, we talked about assumptions, and assumptions that we assume to be true, usually taken for granted, rather than questioned, right? Again, when we assume something, we just go, oh, we just know because we just know. That's just an assumption. The problem with that is it's not always based on fact. It's just based on something that has maybe influenced what you assume to be true, whether that's parents, siblings, teachers, TVs, movies, internet, or friends. These are the things that influence what our assumptions are. Oftentimes we just take things at face value. We don't look too deep. We just read the title of an article and then assume we know exactly what the article is about. In fact, I think it's NPR who does this every year for April Fools. Take a look. They will do an article that's going to have a very big title for the article, and it's going to catch your attention. And if you look at the comments, guaranteed you're always going to have people in the comment section who go ranting and raving, but they didn't read the article. Because what NPR does is underneath the title, they go, this is not a real article. We just literally use the title to see how many comments we would get, and guaranteed every time. So anyway, oftentimes assumptions come from not really knowing all the facts or following up with what we've been told. The assumptions are also a part of, are kind of led by our values. So our values, we've talked about before, are again our beliefs, ideals, and our principles that we consider to be worthy or of high regard. The influence behind that is again parents, siblings, teachers, classroom, school, TVs, movies, internet, church, and books. So now our values get a little bit more influenced by, again, religion or things that we read. So now that we understand what our value assumptions are, we got to take a look at our reality assumptions. Now, reality assumptions are assumptions about what is true and what is factual, okay? We can disagree about the truth, but that doesn't change the truth. So you can have an assumption about what is real and true, but unless you have facts behind that, it is still an assumption. You see that very often with maybe political views or statements. People make these assumptions based on maybe, again, like we talked about, the title of something or maybe something somebody reposted, but didn't follow through with understanding truly what the reality was. And that's just, we have so much information coming at us, we just see these snippets and then we take it and we hold it and assume it to be true without following up. Those are reality assumptions, what we assume to be true, even if they aren't. Okay. Let's see here. When we make assumptions about what's true, it's because often they're based on the truths that have just been implied and taken for granted. So in other words, the assumptions, we take it at face value, but we don't follow through. I know I just kind of said that, but it's pretty much what we're saying. Why is it important that we understand reality assumptions? Because reality assumptions underlie our values, right? And so if we have a certain level of value, we're going to take those values and push it on how we see the world. The problem with that is just because we have those values and we want to push it, towards our assumption of reality, it skews the way we see things and it skews our understanding of reality and what's really out there. These are things to be mindful of as we go to look at something and, we hold that to be true, but we haven't followed through with, is it really? Is it what's behind me wanting to see reality in this way? What values are there? What kind of assumptions am I making? Is this really true? As a critical thinker, our goal is to always try and find what the truth and the facts are. I'm going to give you a little example. Okay, when you see these two lines, you can say, look, these two lines are not intersecting, right? But as we make this line a little bit further, as we get more information, we start to realize, oh, wait, at some point they are going to intersect. The more information you get, the more you start to go, oh, what I assumed to be true is not quite true. As I get more information, I start to see what is true. And this is why sometimes with science people go, oh, well, they said this in science, but this is what really happened. That's because you only have so much information. The more information you get, the more conclusions you can, or the more data you collect, the more you're going to get a more true answer. Does that make sense? Anyway, this is why science is tough, because oftentimes the more data we get, the more we go, oh, this is why. Okay, now that we have more, we see that the lines do intersect. Anywho, in other words, make sure you're getting more information before you make that final assumption about reality is. All right, so let's take a look at page 27. We're going to include again, when we talk about claim, reason, and warrant. We're going to go through those again. We've done that last in chapter 2. So when we talk about differing reality assumptions, you have two people who have an assumption about what reality is based on their values. And we're going to talk about, Butterfly Hill, if you remember the conversation we had about her and the loggers. Now, Butterfly Hill's values was the value of the forest, and without nature, humans can't survive. We need to keep the trees going. Well, the loggers are like, well, our values are, our family eating and, giving wood for those to make homes, right? And so while they are not wrong, they're just reality assumptions for the values in which they hold. So an example we're going to use on page 27 is different reality assumptions based on the SAT scores. Okay. Oftentimes when people go to apply for a college, they will look at what the accepted SAT scores are to see whether or not it is really a college for them, something that, they should either strive for, apply to, and, if it's going to be the right fit for them. And there's two points of view on this. The first one would be the argument against applying for schools whose student body has a high SAT scores in the students applying. So the claim is that a high school student should not apply to colleges where the average SAT score is 150 to 200 points higher than theirs. I'm reading, so this is where my eyes are going. Sorry if it's confusing. It just helps if I have something to follow. Okay, so the reason that the students will not likely succeed is based on the warrant that the SAT scores are accurate predictions of how well a student is prepared for English and math, okay, in these colleges. So the argument is that if you have scores that are below 150 to 200 below the actually accepted scores, don't go for it because you're going to struggle. That's this argument, okay? Now, the opposing argument to that is the claim that students shouldn't use standardized scores as a measure of their future success. And the reason for this is that the SAT tests may predict only a possible struggle for the first-year students. The warrant, which is, again, the reality assumption, is that what will really get students through challenges of freshman year are their character qualities that are not measured by tests. Okay, so the opposition to that would be they can do it. This one test is not going to be the end all be all for their success. Okay, now they both share a similar value assumption, which is that education is valuable. Okay, the difference is about what will actually help the student succeed. So we look at one, it's like don't try and go for something that's so far out of your league that you're going to end up dropping out, while the other one's like, well, the test doesn't necessarily mean that's going to be the case. Still go for it because you can still succeed. Value assumption, we value education, but each reality assumption is that, hey, look, you're not going to make it, or you can go for it anyway. Okay, that's the difference between the value assumption, which is the student's success, versus the reality assumption of what will make them successful. Okay, so hopefully that helped. I try. We'll see. Okay, so the thing I want you to consider is at Butte, we used to have a test which was it was like an Accuplacer and then the compass test. And I remember when I was at Paradise High School, and I was going to Butte. Yes, I went to Butte. I remember that we had to take tests to get set into our, placed wherever. And I'll be honest with you, I suck at tests. I suck at all of a sudden, like, hey, do this thing. I'm like, but I didn't prepare. I don't know what I'm doing. There's a time. Anxiety. I just would lose it. And the problem with that is it didn't include, anything else that probably would have, my 4 years of high school. It didn't include any of that, as I was applying for college, which I'm sure advisors and stuff could have helped me decide what to do based on the classes I took and the grades I got versus one test. We can talk about tests and the money they bring in and make blah, blah, blah. But if we ignore that and just look at whether or not these tests are helping students, 75% of those who took the math ended up in a remedial math class. I loved English, so I was very passionate about it. But when it came to math, I made the assumption that I was dumb. I cannot remember where they placed me in math, but I do remember like seeing the math test going, oh, I'm so screwed. Anyway, I ended up in calculus or something somewhere, so I didn't have to waste a whole bunch of time taking all these remedial maths because, of this stupid test, where a lot of times students who, if you're like me, panic during a test, you would have ended up, 4 semesters behind because of it. So they got rid of these tests because they were recognizing that your grades and your experiences through high school was actually more accurate than this test. And yeah, it's very disheartening if you're, just a panicked test taker like me and end up spending an extra, 2 years having to retake math you've already taken, just to get to the place where you were already at before you even started college. So this is why when we talk about reality assumptions and when people, just make these assumptions that these tests, the reality is that these tests will get you where you need to go, that is not, as we are seeing, that is not accurate. That is not true to the data and research that we have received. Okay. All right, so just to kind of give you an example based on, personal experiences and things that we've seen at Butte. Sometimes they were helpful to kind of give us a guide, but it shouldn't be the end all be all to send you off somewhere where you're like, dude, that was a bad day. I was sick, I was hungover, I was tired, I was scared. You know what I mean? Like that one shot, I don't like that. Okay. All right, so reality assumptions unfortunately lead to things such as myths and stereotyping. We'll get to that in a second. All right, so I'm going to cover a couple myths that always crack me up. One that's in the book is when you go outside with wet hair, you're going to get sick. There's no science behind that. Could be mental. I don't know. I don't know what that all. See, let me see what the book says. I didn't read that full thing. Let's see. Oh, Hell's Bells. I can't find it. I forget where it was at. I just saw it and I was laughing. I was like, oh, I forgot about that. Reality assumptions. Going outside with wet hair. Many people assume that going outside with wet hair may help cause a cold, even though most medical experts have long maintained that colds are caused by a virus and not by wet or cold conditions. I would imagine when your nose gets wet, you're touching your hands, you're touching your face. A lot of times that's how things get transmitted. So that would be my medical expertise. Who the hell am I? Look at that, making assumptions, right? Okay, anyway, so this is how it starts, right? I make the assumption, I tell my kids tell their friends. Before we know it, there's this assumption that this is how colds are being spread. I mean, we know that touching your face spreads viruses, but anywho, see how that could go very, very quickly. Okay, anyway, let's get into real examples of myth. So if you were to drop a penny from the Empire State Building, it would kill somebody on the sidewalk. Not possible. Right? The speed at which it drops, probably not feel good, but wouldn't kill anybody. Lightning never strikes the same place twice. I love watching nature, and one time I literally watched the Weather Channel for like 2 hours because I was watching storms go through the South. Anyway, yeah, lightning definitely strikes places twice. So oftentimes people use that as a, I guess euphemism for lightning never strike, for luck. Anyway, Houseflies have a lifespan of 24 hours. And I put a little link there, careful like downloads, but it's that little snippet from A Bug's Life where there's a fly at the circus, at the flea circus going, I only got 24 hours left to live and I ain't gonna waste it here. That's actually a lie. I learned this coincidentally. You know how like in the summertime here in Chico, there's like flipping flies everywhere. Well, they get into the house and I would close the window between the fly gets stuck between the screen and the window. And I was like, look, this guy's going to be gone in 24 hours. It's fine. That bugger buzzed there for like a month. And I was like, oh my God, I'm torturing this thing. I should have just killed it. Well, what happens actually is flies, I believe, live up to about 30 days. So not 24 hours, but at least 24 days. So anyway, you see a fly, just get rid of it. I'm an anti-flying mosquito person. I usually don't like killing things. I always feel regret after. Flies, not so much. Mosquitoes, not so much. Anyway, I don't believe they should be wiped from the earth or anything. I just don't like them. They annoy me. Anyway, all right. Birds die from eating wedding rice. Nope. Okay. The reason why this reality assumption this is actually a great reason why reality assumptions can be quite dangerous, is because while this is not necessarily dangerous for humans, but we have made laws, there's actual laws in certain states and counties where you cannot throw rice at a wedding with the assumption that the birds are going to eat it and their stomachs are going to explode. I mean, when you think the science of how rice is made and the temperatures it'd have to be at in order for it to expand enough to explode a bird's stomach. Anyway, laws have been passed not to throw rice at weddings because of this myth. I'd like you to think about how often we have made laws, legislation, rules and things based on reality assumptions, things that aren't true, things that have not been proven to be true, that have just been taken for granted and assumed true. And maybe the impact that might have on us as human beings. While this particular one is just not feeding birds, I mean, most people will, throw bird seed or make bubbles or whatever. Oftentimes, these reality assumptions, these things that are not true, that are based on certain values or value assumptions, can be very impactful for people's lives and sometimes very detrimental. So we have to be mindful when we are thinking about things and we are screaming things from the rooftops on whether or not they are true. Are they really? Or is it just an influence by your reality assumption or by your values that are blinding you to what's really out there? I implore you to please be mindful as you move forward throughout the world, no matter what you do. The second you see something that gives you an emotional response, I want you to pause and I want you to really look into it and get beyond the conspiracy theories and get beyond the, left or right leaning, news, whatevers. Find the truth. And that's what we need to start doing from here on out. And that could potentially save us from ourselves, because at this moment, there are a lot of reality assumptions that are influencing things and hurting a lot of people. So just be mindful of that. I'm stepping off my soapbox now. All right, dog mouths are cleaner than ours. No. How many times have you seen someone, their dog, they're licking the inside of their mouth. They're like, oh my God, grody. Okay. I think often of like my cat recently bit me and it has taken so long to heal because cat mouths are disgusting. Did you hear that, bear? He's down by my feet. Okay, let's get down to reality assumptions and how they can be dangerous. Just said it. Pretty much just said it. The book talks about things like suicides. It is important to be mindful that if we're making these reality assumptions about something, it could really hurt people. Say you were to say that something like HPV, human papilloma virus, I forget what that's called, HPV. So HPV in women can be very deadly and can lead to cancer. If we made the reality assumption that, I'm just going to throw some weird ass shit out there, so just go with me on this one. So if we were to assume that HPV came from drinking milk. We just a guess. Someone randomly said it. It got picked up on social media. It became a big thing. Maybe it was some, research article that actually was proven incorrect because they were falsifying data, right? So we are making this assumption based on something that's not true. And so we stopped doing research on HPV, which causes cancer in women. And the reason why we stopped doing the research is we assume it's the milk. We just stop. We don't even bother looking anymore. Well, the assumption that we're making is not stopping the virus. It's just stopping the research. And so women will continue to get sick and get cancer. And they're like, oh, it's because of the milk. It's because of the milk. And it's like, turns out it's not. Turns out it's something completely different that we never thought of because we stopped doing the research. It's important that we pay attention to the things that we are saying without valid research. Or if we do see research on it and the peers who are reviewing it are screaming from the rooftops, hey, this is falsified information. We've tried a bazillion times to try and get this to happen again, and it's not happening again based on the protocols in which we are following, which tells us something is wrong in the original research. Okay, so keep that in mind as we move forward. We're going to be doing some, conversations on research. But again, when we're talking about reality assumptions, people's lives are at risk. The book talks about suicide and our assumption about what, causes suicide or what's behind it, or right. If we're making these assumptions, but we don't have the facts, people are getting hurt. People are either getting sick, they're dying. There's more emotional issues that come up that end up hurting multiple people. So this is why it's really important that we understand what is pushing our thoughts on something. What are the values that are distorting what we think we know about what is really out there? This is hard to do, especially if you have, a religion that's very close to your heart that, I talk in my English 2 class. People will die for their country and their God. The problem with that is, unfortunately, oftentimes the information we have is based on reality assumption. It's not what's really truly out there. People die and people get hurt when we don't pay attention to what's really out there. Again, we can argue about what the truth is, but it doesn't change the truth. Keep that in mind as you move forward. Okay. I know I'm being kind of heavy right now, but that's why this is really important that we talk about understanding of reality assumptions and their impact on you as a critical thinker. Really important to be mindful of, again, what are your values? What are your assumptions? And what are your reality assumptions based on those values? And how can you be mindful that you should, how can you be willing to be more flexible with your values as you get more information that comes at you? Hey, this is what our class is about. You took it, you're learning. So application. Okay, so we talked before about inductive reasoning, and it's a process of finding the truth by observation. This comes from data, research, statistical polling, controlled experiments, examples, analogies, like probabilities. Like inductive reasoning is what we're getting from the research. It's pretty easy. Once you do it enough, once you, keep doing the same protocol and you get the same results, you can pretty much go, okay. And that's what inductive reasoning is. It's that the application and the observation and the data that you're gathering. Inductive reasoning, I like inductive reasoning. It's right there. You see the information, the data. Remember the lines, the more you get, the more you know. Okay. Now today, we're going to be talking about deductive reasoning. And these are, deductive reason is the process of inferring a conclusion. Like our conclusion on something is based on the premises in which we put forth. So that might have been a little confusing. Don't panic. Let me see what my definition here is. The process of inferring a conclusion by putting forth true premises in a valid format. Valid format is what we are going to be talking about. Those are syllogisms. Okay. Now, deductive reasoning, the importance with inductive reasoning is that the two premises need to be true in order for the conclusion to be true. That's how you have a valid format. The format is the formula, right? The order in which we put it. I'm going to show you a little video which will help you. Okay, so deductive reasoning contains two reasons stated in the correct format, our premises, which then we can infer the conclusion, right, based on those two premises. Okay, a premise is something that's previously stated. In a syllogism, you have your major premise, all right, which is our larger categorical statement, the main larger categorical statement. Okay, that's our major premise. Then we have a minor premise. Excuse me. The minor premise is an instance or an example, like a case example, right? And then our conclusions inferred based on that categorical, that larger categorical statement and our example. Okay, our major premise and our minor premise gives us our conclusion. Okay. So, deductive reasoning, it makes sure that we can construct a valid argument. Okay. Now, the correct format is if the premises are true, then the conclusion must always be true as well, right? Two positives. Okay. Quality control over the argument. That's kind of our goal here, is having the true premises helps give us the conclusion, right? Where we have again, a sort of quality control over the argument itself. If all of the pieces are in place, we can say we have a sound argument. If the premises are true and that therefore the conclusion is true, we then have a sound argument. And I'm going to give you an example in just a sec. I'm going to show you some videos with some examples. The goal here, let me get down here, is we want to avoid fallacious arguments, okay? A fallacious argument is something in which, again, we have these two premises, the assumption of one of those. And we'll talk about enthymemes in just a second. But before it confuses you too much, go ahead and take a look at the different types of conditional syllogisms we have. I do also have the notes in Canvas, so go ahead and take a look at the lecture notes. We will have 1, 2, 3, 4. We will have 5 conditional syllogisms. We're going to have modus ponens, modus tollens, chain argument, disjunctive syllogism, and argument by elimination. You can take a look at pages 33 to 35 for examples as well, and then go ahead and enjoy this video. I'll talk about it when we're all done.